Welcome to Talks. If you're coming back, welcome back to Starlight Talks. This week I'm here with Iris, and we'll be talking about invisible disabilities and ableism. I do these talks, Starlight Talks, every week on Facebook, Wednesdays at 7 o'clock Pacific Standard Time for about an hour. And I talk about anything related to autism or the disability community. So come back next week if you can. My guest next week, his name is Light, and he'll be talking about why he changed his name to Light. He does a podcast called Mentality Talks, and he's trying to break stigmas of mental health. So come back next week for that. Check out autism.com. I have my blog on the website where I write about living on the spectrum, and I have a new one I just posted. Feel bad I haven't been keeping up with it, but I just posted a new one for Autism Acceptance Awareness Month. It's about fear parenting, which we talked about last week. It's called The Land of Fear and What If, so check that out if you haven't seen it. It's and then we have our launch party coming up, so please come to that. You can RSVP to that on the website, and then I have the workshop in Florida coming up. All of that you can RSVP and get tickets for on the website, and I think I have links on all the Facebook, Instagram pages, all that stuff. So thank you guys for joining. This is Iris. If you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Iris, and I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease when I was about 11 years old. For those of you who don't know, Crohn's disease is a part of inflammatory bowel diseases, and it affects your intestinal tract, and it's an autoimmune disease, so your body basically attacks itself. And I had a pretty severe case of it from the get-go. And so I went through all of the available medications that they have, all of the oral medications and pills, and also the injections and infusions that are offered, all of which are immunosuppressants to kind of help my immune system not attack itself. And when all of that failed, I ended up in the hospital at UCSF quite a bit and spent most of the year in and out of the hospital for several weeks at a time, getting blood transfusions and trying to get nutrition, and any way to kind of keep myself a little bit stable, because none of the medications were really working. And so when they all failed, they ended up having to do surgery, and they did 3 major surgeries to remove my colon, which is called a colectomy. And the first surgeries remove the colon and create what's called an ostomy, which is where the bit of your intestines that are left over are attached to the outside of your body, so your body can kind of heal. And then eventually everything is kind of reattached and kind of working normal-ish. And yeah, so they kind of did final surgeries to improve all of that. And it definitely helped, but I still continued to have problems afterwards and problems with pain management and inflammation. And so I still take a number of medications to keep me stable, and my health is still fluctuating. And you can't really tell when it's going to get better and when it's going to get worse. It just kind of happens. Stress can obviously influence it and make it worse as well. But yeah, so that's kind of what I've been dealing with on and off for the past decade or so. And because of that, I got a service dog recently. Her name is Stella, and she helps me get medications and alerts me to when I'm having problems, helps me if I have blood pressure problems and if I start to feel lightheaded from everything. Yeah, so she's super great. Got her, I think, about 5 months ago. So yeah, she helps me with everything as well. And that's how I met Chloe. And yeah, so that's a little bit about me and my invisible illness. Um, yeah.
Yeah. So um, I have a lot of family members who have different dietary issues,
Mhm.
and I know that going out to eat can be really difficult. Like there's just the anxiety that even if someone knows how to make your meal, they'll just forget and do their normal thing.
Yeah.
And you'll end up with something in your food that you're allergic to. And
Yeah.
then there's also like people have no idea what an allergy is,
Yes.
and so the only thing I'm allergic to is cashews, which don't show
Mhm.
up in a lot of things,
Yeah.
most things. So I'm really lucky. But my sister has allergies to things like tomatoes, and that
Mhm.
appear all over the place. And when she goes, "I'm allergic to tomatoes," they're like, "Oh, we'll just pick them out." Like that's not how
That
allergies
the
work.
residue's still there, doesn't work.
Um, so I know things you don't really think about can affect you on the daily and how you live your life. Like, oh, I'm going to be out all day. Should I pack food? Is there going to be a place I can eat? All those kind of things I know come into factors. And then on those on the autism spectrum, they may not be allergic to the food, but food can cause sensory overloads and all those kind of things due to the texture, taste, smell.
Yeah.
So they walk into a place that smells like fish and they can't handle it and they have
Yeah.
to walk out. So those invisible disabilities, people just think, oh, they don't really like that. Like, no, it
Yes.
affects them to their core. Um, and so we're gonna bring light today to all
Mhm.
those different kind of things that you might not be aware that someone's going through. So if you see them having a rough time or someone doing something you think is a little bit abnormal, then take a second and lose that judgment and
Yes.
think about what
Yeah.
they might be going through.
Yeah, there's definitely a number of things that I deal with almost on a daily or weekly basis that have to do with people just not understanding that I also have a disability. I don't, even though it doesn't appear like I have one. One of the major points that I deal with is I have a handicap placard that I have to use sometimes when I'm too weak to walk long distances. And people get incredibly angry when they don't think that I deserve it in some way. And they don't understand that I actually need it. They just assume that I stole it or I'm, not using it properly or whatever. And it's really unfortunate because the days that I use it are days that I already don't feel good and I already don't have the energy to explain my disability to people and try and reason with them. And those are the days that people often start yelling at me for it or really have quite a over the top reaction. Um, and so usually I try and inform them in the nicest way possible and try and teach them a little bit about it. But it can be really difficult sometimes when people just come off so angry and so strong with their opinion. And, some people I've been able to educate and kind of tell them that they don't really know anything about me. They don't know my story. They they don't see the parts of me that are really sick. They don't see the scars. They don't see the tubes that I have sometimes coming out of my heart because all that's hidden. And they don't get it. And some people end up understanding. And, of course, there's always those people that are just angry and they're going to be angry no matter what. And it's really frustrating. And it really has nothing to do with me. It has to do with them just being angry and they wanted to pick somebody to get angry at that day. And it just happened to be me. But yeah, it's incredibly frustrating sometimes. And also with the service dogs, as you understand, a lot of people don't think that we need them. They don't think that we deserve to have them, or they don't think that it's a valid reason. Um, and I think it's just kind of something as a society that we've built this idea of what a disability looks like and what a disability really is to people. And so they see, I mean, even the disability sign, like on a handicap placard, is somebody in a wheelchair. So, people get this idea of everybody who has a disability has to look like that or similar to that. And that's obviously not the case. So, yeah, it's really frustrating because a lot of times we don't teach um, younger kids, or we don't teach, schools aren't telling people that there are other forms of disabilities. There are everything is valid as a disability. There's no disability that's, not valid to deserve everything else that other disabilities get. So yeah, it's really frustrating. Um, and I know that you also deal with problems with the service dog and people thinking that it's not real, and um, yeah, it's frustrating.
Yeah, it's interesting how many people are not informed on the subject that you'll be speaking about, whether it's autism, whether it's service dogs, and how they're so pushy about, like, oh, only people like this can have service dogs, or only boys can have autism. You're like, where did you pull these facts from
Yeah.
that you believe to your core? Yeah, so I'm sure you've run into that as well. It,
Yeah, and people assume that they somehow they
no.
they assume that they know more about you than you know about you, and it doesn't really make sense. That they just assume that it's not real, and people just really aren't educated enough about it. And everybody's kind of presented with this idea when they're young that disabilities look a certain way, and that's not the case most of the time. I would say it's 50-50 on whether people actually have a visible disability or not. And I don't want to look, if I am able to look normal, for me, that makes me feel more comfortable. So, I had to, for a while, put an NG tube in, which is basically where I put a tube into my nose, down into my stomach, and that helps give me nutrition. And most of the time, a doctor will put that tube in and you leave it in for however long you need it, and then a doctor will pull the tube out. But I was in high school and I really wanted to look normal, and I didn't want people to know that I had a tube. And so I would put it in every night and take it out every morning, and nobody knew. Um, and it was just really frustrating when people would assume that I didn't need accommodations that I had, um, just because they didn't see what I was going through every night. They didn't see, they don't see all the medications that I take. They don't see the injections that I do. All of that is not really shown to them. And it's not because I'm ashamed of it in any way. It's just that a lot of people also make snap judgments about it. And so I want people to kind of know me for me before they know, anything else. And then, but my disability is also part of my identity. It made me who I am. So it's definitely, it's a part of me, and it's an important thing for people to know about me if I care about them and I want them to truly understand my situation. But it's also something that I feel I have to be a little bit careful about, because people do make snap judgments. And that can be really frustrating when they automatically make assumptions about you because of your diagnosis. So it's kind of a balance of, I want to be open and honest as much as possible, but at the same time, I want people to know the other parts of me as well.
Yeah, I understand that. Like when I meet someone for the first time, I almost feel like I need to be like, "Hi, I'm Chloe, and I have autism."
Mhm.
Otherwise, they'll be like, "This person is not making sense to me," and
Yeah.
they'll make those judgments. Where when I go, "Oh, I have autism," all of a sudden they accept my little
Mhm.
weird quirks, whatever they want to call them. Um, where I wish I just didn't have to do that. And then a lot of times they want explanation on that. It's like I've explained it so many times, and it's not that
Yes.
I don't want you to know. It's just exhausting to re-explain all that when I just want to be like, hey, let's hang out and have a good time and like become friends. That's why I'm here.
Yeah, it's so tiring just because, you know, we have to explain ourselves over and over and over again. And it's, you know, like that would be tiring for anybody. If you asked any person, disability or not, what their life story is 10 times a day, they would get so tired of that.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of ridiculous to expect somebody who does have a disability to explain themselves over and over again. And I think, you know, there should just be kind of a general understanding for everybody, whether they have a disability or not, because it shouldn't matter to people. And
you're telling very personal information as
yeah,
well.
They would get so tired whether they have a disability or not, because it shouldn't matter to people.
You don't know how to turn the volume off.
And you're telling
Very personal information. Do you want to just turn the computer on? So, this is my friend Dara. Can you see the comment? So this is my friend Dara. She did a live stream a while ago on anxiety, and she did one on what is it called? What did I call it? Well, she did it on. She has irritable bowel syndrome and dietary restrictions. So she did it on something like that, and so her journey was that they misdiagnosed, because she was diagnosed with an anxiety disorder. Yep. And so they told her that her stomach pains and all that were related to her anxiety disorder. And they were not.
Yeah.
She decided to start cutting things out of her diet and found out that tomatoes were making her stomach upset.
Yep.
So it took her, I don't know, years to figure that out, when someone should have just done some tests and listened to her. Wow. So I know that's a very common story as well, that anxiety is when my sister went through that, they thought, not with the medical community, but there were people that said, oh, it's in her head, it's anxiety, it's not real, like that she wasn't actually in pain, that it was all in her head, or anxiety causing her pain. I know a lot of people with disabilities get that, like.
Yeah, well, because they are truly very connected, but that doesn't mean that your stomach pain is invalidated because your anxiety happens to kind of coincide with it. And it's incredibly frustrating, like we were talking about, having to explain to anybody that we know about why we do the things we do and kind of how we have to accommodate our lives. And it can be even more frustrating when there are doctors that are questioning you as well, because those are the people you feel like you should be able to rely on. And those are the people you feel like should back you up. And having to kind of validate yourself to them as well is, you know, incredibly frustrating at the same time, because it's, oh, hello, Stella. And yeah, so it's really frustrating. And, you know, and a lot of people, they don't get it. Like when they think that it's everybody's information. Like I think I was at like the car dealer or something the other day, and a guy asked if Stella was my service dog, and I said yes. And he kind of was like, well, why do you have her? And I was like, well, you can't really ask that. And so I told him, just because I assumed that might just kind of make him go away and he would accept that answer. But he didn't. He just kept inquiring like more and more questions. And it was just really, really frustrating, because it was like, I'm not asking you your whole medical history. Why are you asking me mine? But at the same time, like I understand that not everybody gets it. Not everybody knows people with disabilities, especially at a younger age. Like people tend to assume that it's only older people who deal with certain medical problems. If you're young, you should be fine. Like you're young, you have energy, when that's not the case. So it's frustrating just because I do want to tell people and I do want them to be informed about it. But I definitely have to be kind of careful about whether I think that person is genuine with their curiosity, versus them just kind of not really using it for the right reasons or they don't really care. But it's incredibly tiring to have to make those judgments all day long and try and figure out who you feel like you can trust with your information and who's going to respect you and who's going to accept the way that you are and, accommodate you, but at the same time still treat you normally. Like it's incredibly complicated. um and yeah, it's frustrating.
Yeah. On that note of like people thinking that that information is just for the public, I had someone who believed that there was a registry for service dogs that
Yeah.
there like had this whole story about how there was a card with a number on it, like an identification number, like your like an
Like
ID
a
would have.
license. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, so do you have a place where you can log in this number and see if it's registered? And he's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, because this doesn't, from my information, this doesn't exist. Because I was going along because I knew he wasn't
Yeah.
gonna just take. I don't have it as an answer. So I was like going along with it. Like, where do you plug this in? And also, why would you, as a business owner, be able to log into this registry?
Yeah.
Like, so people are like, do people want us to register our dogs that I have autism and a service dog, who my service dog is, all this private information, and anyone can just log into it and see all this private information? No, that doesn't make sense. What
It's
that's
yeah.
that sounds so scary if we had to do that.
And it's like there's no good way to do that because
Mm-hmm.
how do you decide who really needs the dog and who
Yeah.
doesn't? And like it gets so complicated. So it's impossible to have a system like that. At least at this moment in time, it's not logical.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I've even had same thing with the handicap placard. I've had police officers several times come up to me and ask to see the placard, and they call it in to the station and then ask to see my ID and see if they match or not. And it's so frustrating because it's like you are a police officer. You're supposed to be informed on these things and not, assume that, you can like discriminate against me because I look fine. Like it's so scary when these people that you feel like are in authority also don't believe you.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like, well, I shouldn't have to prove myself to them. Like I can, kind of brush off a random stranger who doesn't understand. But when somebody who I'm supposed to trust also doesn't understand, then that's really, really frustrating. Hi, baby. Hi. Um, so yeah, it's incredibly difficult. I did you ever have any problems like how often do you have problems with businesses and getting your service dog in there?
I found that the bigger the city, the more issues I've had.
Okay, interesting.
Um, where I I thought it would be the opposite because I've gone to like these rural towns. Like I went to a rural town in Texas, and I've been to on my way to uh, to Lake Tahoe. I went to all these ghost towns, and like I like going to places like that. And I was like, well, I'm not sure they're going to be informed on everything that bigger businesses would be informed on. And
Yeah.
okay, but like they didn't seem to even care. Like they were just like, oh,
Mhm.
cool, a dog, go ahead, bring it in.
Yeah.
Like they were happy, even happy to see a dog. Where
Huh.
when I would go to like when I was in New York, I was like so sure everyone was going to be informed.
Mm.
Nobody was informed. Everywhere I went, they were like, "Oh, I need to see the ID. I need to see like some form of paperwork. Like they ask questions like that, which is illegal to ask. And I
Yeah.
was like, this does not make any sense. Do they never run into anyone, or does everyone in New York just give up and like make one of those fake IDs to just not deal with that? Because I see, like, if I
I
lived there, I would do that because it got to a point where like every single
yeah.
place I entered asked for that.
Yeah, I have a feeling that there are a number of people who do get kind of those fake certificates and registration.
Mm-hmm.
And so when a business owner asks, then they hand them that. And that gives them the impression that everybody has one of those when that's not the case, because that doesn't matter. Um, and I've had the same problem in college where a guy came up to me and he was like, "Is your dog registered at the school as a service dog?" And I was like, I don't understand. That's not a thing. Like,
And also,
you know,
why is it the student's business?
yeah, like I don't know where people come up with these things. And it's really frustrating because I feel like we wouldn't necessarily be asked these questions if we had a visible disability.
Mm-hmm.
It's because it's invisible that people question it so much. Like I've never seen anybody question a seeing eye dog for a blind person like that. They assume that it's real.
I've had people assume I was blind because I have to be blind if I have like.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've had a lot of situations like that where people thought I had a different disability. They just assumed what
Mhm.
it was for. Um, so it yeah, it's interesting. I've had some people, like really great people, go, "Oh, I want to learn more about service dogs. Can you tell me what other kinds of service dogs there are?" And I'm like, "Yeah, of course."
Yeah.
Um,
I love when people are
yeah,
actually like genuinely curious.
yeah. So I've informed people, like Uber drivers have asked me that kind of
Mhm.
stuff, and like normally those kind of people don't ask like, "Oh, what does your dog do?" and like your story.
Yeah.
They just want to know genuinely about service dogs, and I like that because it's not prying into your life.
Mhm.
It's just like they want some general information so
Yeah.
that they know and can adapt to other people's life better, and I love that. Um,
Yeah. It's the
yeah.
same, I feel like, with children, right? Because a lot of kids don't understand
Mm-hmm.
you can't pet the service dog. Um, And I love when there are parents that are teaching their children, and I overhear them kind of say, okay, anytime you see a dog that's working like that with the vest on like that, you don't go and touch them, you don't talk to them, you don't distract them. And I almost like want to hand out like thank you cards to all those parents because I appreciate it so much. Um, but then, kind of on the opposite end, there are parents that are teaching their kid the total wrong thing to do. And they tell their child, just go pet it when she's not looking. Like they're
Oh.
teaching their child to like sneak around and, figure out like how to get around the system. And I'm like, that's not okay. I don't understand like why a parent would do that. It's like trying to teach your kid to steal. Like it's not, don't do that. Um, so yeah, it's really frustrating. And we've also encountered situations where people said they had like a service, what was it, like an owl, like a service owl, um, like things like that. And unfortunately, like those kinds of things can take away like the validity of a real service animal to a lot of people because they just assume everybody who looks fine is kind of trying to cheat the system in a way. Um, and obviously that's not true for either of us. So yeah, it's frustrating. Um, and it's kind of like with anything, people that abuse the system ruin it for the people who actually do need to use the system properly.
Mhm.
And that's kind of how most things go. And it's unfortunate. Um, but, you're right. I love when there are people that are genuinely curious and they really want to know about it. Um, and,
One
you
of
know,
my favorite interactions that I've had with a service dog is a blind man came up to me and said, "You don't look like you need a service dog." And I know where he was coming from because he was an elderly gentleman. He was
Mhm.
like my grandpa. And like
Yeah.
they asked things in the most harshest way where he was
There's
genuinely
there's like
asking, "Oh,
no filter.
why do you need a service dog? I don't quite understand."
Yeah.
Um, but he was blind and he literally said, "You don't look like you need a service dog." And it
This doesn't
took
make any sense.
so much for me not to start laughing. And his wife was with him and she was like, "Oh."
I know, like some definitely like with older generations, they're not as educated about service animals. They think that all service dogs have to be guide dogs for the
Uh-huh.
blind.
Yeah, and then when I explained it to him, he was so sweet. It was like, "Oh, I understand. That's really cool that you have that."
Yeah.
He's like, "Oh, I have a service dog too. It's my wife."
Mhm.
It was so cute. But yeah, that was one of my favorite interactions. That was hilarious. Um, so I like this comment from Dara. We didn't really get to like what she actually said. When people start comparing and saying which is worse, they all had their own ways and five challenges. Um, that really bothers me when people are like, "Oh, it could be so much worse," or like, "Oh, I've been through worse, so you've not really
Yeah.
been."
Can you see stuff in the comments? It's very funny.
Yeah.
They're having a very good time.
Through any, that's there's a phrase for that. It's like the there's children starving in Africa, so don't be upset. Like
Yes,
that.
yeah. It's that kind of mentality, and it's incredibly damaging to people. Hi, honey. Can you sit? Good girl. Lay down. Lay down. Come on. But yeah, so it's incredibly damaging to people with any disability to compare people's situations. I mean, it's damaging to compare anybody's situation. It's just, nobody's is better or worse. Things affect people differently. Um, and you can't really say objectively what situation is worse than somebody else's situation. But we do definitely have society's kind of created this hierarchy of what is more severe than something else. Like if somebody was like, "Oh, I broke up with my boyfriend," and then somebody said, "Oh, well, my grandma died." We assume that like the person whose grandma died, that's worse than breaking up with your boyfriend. Like we just kind of create this stupid hierarchy in
Yeah, and
society.
like I've definitely seen people in competition of like who has a worse life and who. And like that
Yeah.
doesn't make sense to me. If ever I'm like sharing an experience when someone's upset, it's like, "Oh, I'm trying to share that I've been there and I know how hard it is and it really sucks." I don't go into it like, "Oh, well, my experience was much worse." Like that doesn't make sense to do. Like
And
it's important to validate someone when they're upset and they're struggling, and
yeah, and
if they're sharing
especially,
it, they're vulnerable,
yeah, especially if you're somebody who's also going through something, instead of kind of tearing other people down going through things, you should be kind of building each other up and supporting each other. But instead, oftentimes, I think, people end up comparing themselves to other people's situations and saying, "Oh, well, mine is worse, blah, blah, blah," because maybe in general they feel invalidated in life, and that people necessarily aren't like believing them, and so they feel the need to kind of say, "Well, mine is worse, look how bad mine is," like
Or there's
that
the
kind of
opposite,
thing.
like, "Oh, I have no right to complain," but it's like, yes, you
Yeah,
do. Like everyone has a right to say, "I'm having a tough day."
yeah, and things affect people so differently. Like everybody is going through whatever emotions, and there aren't emotions that are better or worse than others. They're all valid. They all happen. We all experience them. Um, like of course, there are different levels to you personally, but they're all valid. They all happen. Everybody's experiencing something. Um, and I do find that it's very common in like the kind of community of people with disabilities to say, well, mine is worse. I went through more than you. Like I had this and that. And people often compare, like, if you have certain like physical disabilities, like, oh, well, I had more procedures or I had more whatever. And, so mine was much more difficult than yours. And that's not true. Everybody's on their journey and everybody's dealing with it in their own way. And it's difficult for everyone. So yeah, I definitely notice that a lot. There are a lot of times where people are kind of comparing themselves or saying their situation was easier or harder than somebody else's, and that's not true. And same thing goes for any sort of, mental disorder. Like all of them are valid. Everybody's dealing with things in their own way. Yeah, comparing is definitely, it's a very dangerous thing to do. Because if somebody is already struggling with validating their feelings, and like we spoke about, you struggle every day trying to validate to people, look, it's real. I'm really dealing with this. It's actually really difficult for me. And then somebody comes along who you think should have this camaraderie with you, and they also knock you down and they go, yeah, yours isn't that bad, mine is way worse. Then you're like, wait, so who can I rely on to support me? Because it feels like everybody's invalidating my experience, and it just can spiral into a really bad situation.
Yeah, like you met my sister who has Crohn's and she's in remission right now. If you were like, well, you don't really have Crohn's because I have it worse. Like there's people who like interact that way where you're like, oh, somebody else who has it, we can talk and relate. Like that's such a better mentality to have.
Yeah.
That,
and I deal with that a lot, definitely, because I do have a whole bunch of friends who all have Crohn's or ulcerative colitis, and and they all have different levels, objectively of severity, and like how medically they would kind of classify it. But that doesn't mean that your feelings about it and the pain that you go through and how difficult those situations are better or worse than anybody else's situation, because everybody suffers in their own way. And yeah, it's so scary when somebody tries to knock somebody else down for their experience when they're clearly already suffering and trying to go through something. And it makes somebody take so many steps backwards in their healing process, and can lead to all sorts of problems. Even if you're dealing mainly with physical problems and somebody just continues to invalidate your experience, then it's going to add on all sorts of mental problems surrounding that as well. And we know how connected, especially with autoimmune diseases, like physical and mental problems are. The second you get stressed and the second you get anxious, it's going to make you physically worse. And then you get physically worse and somebody doesn't believe you, so you get more anxious. And it's just this terrible cycle that can lead people down a really bad road.
yeah.
So
Another thing that happens is when you have something chronic every day, your entire life, then people go, well, you need to get over that. Where like you're gonna have good days and bad days, and you're probably gonna have some more bad days than other people because it is chronic. And like that validation, I think, is really important rather than, like understand that on those good days I had it as well.
Yeah.
But today I can't do all the things I did yesterday because I did all the things yesterday.
Yeah. Yes, that's a great point about kind of guilt surrounding good days.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that everybody struggles with a disorder that you have for a long period of time, because you have really sick days that come out of nowhere and really bad days. And then there's days where you feel good and you actually do something and people guilt you for actually doing something. And they're like, well, you were sick yesterday. How come you're fine today? Why'd you
Mhm.
cancel on me yesterday?
Or
Like,
you
you
were
seem
fine
fine
yesterday,
now.
you're not sick today. Like
Yeah.
it goes like both ways. Like just um and so like they invalidate both the good day and the sick day and
And it's like,
like,
what are you supposed to do then? Like, you
so,
can't,
yeah.
you can't truly feel and like have your bad day validated, and then you feel like you can't really enjoy your good day either because you feel guilty about having a good day.
Yeah.
So it's just like, it's really frustrating because people kind of put you in this position where you're so stuck, and you can't really feel a lot of times truly like happy or validated in your situation, no matter where you are, or how you're doing.
Yeah, like your story you told me about how people have this impression of sick people are supposed to be sad all the time and wear sweatpants and no makeup
Yeah, yeah.
and like and you like to dress up. Like I love
Mm-hmm.
your vintage fashion and like all
Yeah.
those pictures you post online. And there's a lot of people, like my mom's similar to you, where when she's not feeling well, she wants to dress up a little bit more. And when you do that, people don't assume you're fine, like you're having a really, really good day, when that's not the case for everyone, you know?
Yeah, a
Just
lot of
because,
times I do
yeah,
it to compensate for having
yeah.
a bad day because it makes me feel a little bit better. Yeah.
Um, so that like everyone's case is different, so appearances don't show like what you do on a bad day doesn't mean that's what everyone does on a bad day, and what you do on a good day doesn't mean that's what everyone does on a good day.
Yeah.
And so I think it's important to just understand people and listen to them and validate them where they're coming from.
Hmm. Yeah. And I think you have a question from Heather.
Put it up here. So Heather says, hi, my son is 10 with mild high functioning autism, dealing with many things right now. One is being told no, he will have a meltdown if he has to get off his video game. Any advice? We don't want to resort to meds. Well, one thing I would say is transitioning with autism, especially if he's in hyper focus on a video game, if that is his safe place that he loves, transitioning is going to be really, really difficult. And to like say, get off the video game is not going to work. So the best thing to help with that is to do slow transitions. Okay, in 10 minutes, you're going to have to start saying goodbye to everyone. Okay, 10 minutes more. Now we're going to start closing down the game. Okay, 10 minutes more. Now we're going to close off the computer. Okay, now we're going to back away from the computer and like do it step by step. That'll make it a little bit easier to handle. So and if he doesn't understand time, then give him, there's other ways to represent time as well. So, um, yeah, so I would say that's one of the big things. Um, so right now doesn't work a lot with the autism community. So you're not like, that's just going to be a tough thing to do. So I would give more time than just right now. That I know that like even at school, I was like the last one to leave classroom because I had to transition. So packing up took longer, leaving the room took longer, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, so definitely if it's even a preferred activity, that transition time is going to be even longer. So take that into account if you need to go somewhere and he's on a video game. Yeah, I remember like going to Disneyland in the car and just sitting in the car and everyone's gotten out and going, Chloe, you need to get out of the car now. We're here. And I'm like, I'm not ready to be here yet. I'm just sitting. So transitions can take a little bit longer for us with autism. I have a whole article on transitions. If you want to go to my blog, I've written about that. And I hope to do a live stream on that topic. It's very interesting to me how moving spaces in our mind works. It's so different from the average person, like especially like those neurotypical can quickly move from one thing to another, and I'll be stuck in this phase of yeah, so I would say starting there, and then if he's in defense mode, then he's definitely not gonna want to get off the computer until off a computer is a better place than online. And so that takes a lot of validation, a lot of trust, a lot of invitation and not forcing.
So almost like presenting being off of video games as a better thing than being on it.
Yeah. So the way I explain it is it's like interacting with a wounded animal where you want them to come to you rather than forcing them, because that's just you're gonna get attacked.
Yeah.
So instead of like slamming the computer closed and taking it, it's presenting like, hey, I'm gonna be in the living room for 30 minutes. If you want to come join me, we can talk. And then doing that until he actually shows up, and then validating everything, practicing deep listening until that trust is built, talking about what he wants to build to do, and a even better way than that is to say, hey, can I play the video game with you, or can you tell me about your video game, and allowing him to say no and being like, no, not right now. But keep asking, obviously not in the same day, like, or the same hour, but like coming back and asking again the next time he plays. So that would be my suggestions. And I just got a bunch of questions. Oh, so Josh, what does he say? If I may suggest, try giving him a time when he needs to be off the game. Right? He needs to be forewarning before he even gets on, just like Chloe is saying. Yes. Going like, okay. So especially if you need to go somewhere, saying, okay, you have this amount of time to be on the game, accounting for it's going to take him like 30 minutes to get off the game. And he'll be quicker the more you transition like that. But it'll take longer and longer the more you abruptly transition. So yeah, perfect advice. So Josh has a podcast that's really cool. I think it's Josh has autism, or something like that, which is really cool. Where his mom interviews him about his life with autism. So y'all check that out. Thank you. It seems the older he gets, the worse he gets. Another question is, he has no filter. Is this common? Yes, it's common. For sure. So those of us with autism tend to be a little bit way more straightforward with how we say things. We do not beat around the bush.
Which isn't necessarily a bad thing.
It's not.
It can be very helpful.
So, yeah. That is, so hopefully you're not trying to change that.
Would you say that changes at all with age?
It changes when you get told that's not okay.
Okay.
So that can happen with age. So if you're, so either like there's less talking being done, or like when I was little, that's one of the reasons why I went into selective mutism.
Yeah.
Or there's like a hyper focus on certain areas. So they'll try to change the topic to something that they know a lot about and know they can talk about without getting someone upset. And so normally it's less vulnerable topics. So you'll see someone talk about their favorite book, a video game, their favorite area of biology, or the most common example for some reason is trains. I don't know. So you'll see that as a common thing. And another thing is scripting or echolalia, which is scripting would be having prepared answers. So say you've answered the question before and you know that the answer you gave before didn't get anyone upset, and then you use that same thing again.
Yeah.
And then echolalia is using other people's words. So like you watch a movie and you've seen that interaction in a movie, and so you use that.
Picking up on like what socially is acceptable and forming around.
So those are the tools that you'll often see come up because of that. We don't have a filter thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's very common. So I hope that answers that question.
And then I think there was another question from Eric.
Okay. Hi, I have a question. I have autism and a few friends with autism. I think I did. Okay, do it again.
Yeah, you got it.
Hi, I have a question. I have autism and a few friends with autism, and I get bullied, and they get bullied a lot on social media. How can I or my friends deal with people that bully? Well, I would suggest on social media blocking the bullies and not interacting with them. If it's offline, I mean, you can sort of block people who do that, and if they're, by saying, I don't want to hang out with you anymore. If they're like strangers, I don't know why someone would do that.
I think it's also important to remember that these bullies are they're not doing, it doesn't have anything to do with you. They're doing what they're doing because they're having problems, whatever that may be. They're dealing with something at home or within themselves that they're trying to figure out. And so they're going to bully anybody. It has nothing to do with, bullying you specifically. They're going to pick any target that they can find. So I think it's also important to remember that there's obviously nothing wrong with you if you're getting bullied.
I mean, I think the best defense is to not care what they say. Obviously, that's not easy as I say it is.
Yeah.
So I would like to, I think knowing the specific situation would help a little bit more with how to deal with that. I don't want to give you the wrong advice, because obviously if someone's punching you, it's very different than someone verbally saying something to you. And then that also goes to so many different things. But I think just telling someone, what you did hurt my feelings, normally they don't even know. So like someone could be a bully and have no idea. And then there's others who straight out bully people on purpose. And I don't know why they do that. It's just they need to get their emotion out somehow, I guess. And that's not a good way to emotionally regulate at all.
Yeah.
And someone needs to teach them how to do that, because obviously they weren't taught.
Yes, definitely.
So I hope that you get through that situation. We got Richard has that nice answer to the video game question. Maybe telling him that he needs to get to save point in the game and put a time frame on it. This way the transition is lower. I think the meltdowns come from being ripped away from it. I know quick transitions are hard. Yeah, that's a good way to transition, is like, after this level, after you beat this one thing, after you get to a save point, those kind of things help as well if you can't do like the 10-minute thing. And also like asking him like, when is a good point to get off as well? Like, giving that control over is really helpful. Oh, so Josh would like another introduction of who you are.
Okay. I'm Iris. I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease when I was around 10 years old, and I've been dealing with that on and off for a very long time, for most of my life, and deal with lots of medications and injections and procedures. And like we were talking about earlier, every day-to-day things that people have to deal with invisible disabilities. And I also have a service dog now as well, and she helps me with everything, helps me get my medication and stay stable. Yeah, so that's kind of a very quick introduction of who I am.
Pamela has another question about video games. My grandson is 19 and graduated high school. Since then, he is just in his room playing video games and watching YouTube videos. I want him to get involved with autism spectrum and meet other kids like him. He is high functioning, but he still has meltdowns now and then. So there's two ages where this normally happens. It's 13 and then 18, 19 after high school, because those are huge transition years, really scary, and people, like, we don't know what to do. And so you'll often see people go into their special interests, not leave their room, go into anxiety, depression, defense mode. So one, I'm going to ask him if he's interested in making friends, because that's really important. If he doesn't want to, then pushing it is not, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
And it would throw his confidence way down if you tried to push him into situations he's not ready for. And then two, does he have the capacity to make friends? Like, is he functioning enough and healthy enough that if he were in a situation to make friends, that it's going to go well? Because if he's in a too much of a negative place, he's not going to attract the right people, and it'll be very upsetting. So it's important to work on those areas before you throw in friends. Like, friends aren't going to fix all that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would refer back to what I said before about transitioning if you want him off the video games. I did a live stream with Danny Rady. If you go back and watch the AE process one, we talked all about how to get out of that state of mind. And I recommend going to Asperger experts for all that information on defense mode, which I believe that is what is going on. That would be my best guess, not knowing the entire situation. And it's a very complicated situation. So what the reason why he's playing video games is because video games simplify everything. It's a very safe place. You don't have to feel vulnerable. You're playing. You know what you're supposed to talk about. You're not supposed to talk about anything vulnerable, like your personal life or anything, and you're allowed to be anonymous. And so until offline becomes safe and as comfortable as the online world, he's not going to get off. And so for whatever reason, he doesn't feel as validated offline as he does online. And video games can be an amazing tool to learn social skills. I know I learned them that way. I know a lot of people learned that way. And so there's nothing wrong with him using video games as emotional regulation or learning social skills and all that. Obviously, if he's not healthy and he's not eating, or he's eating too much or whatever, like, that's all important to take in. But as long as it's free time, I think video games are a great tool. Hopefully that helps your situation.
Yeah, I think she was also curious about him handling a job in the future. Um,
Um, I would take, well, I definitely think he can one
yeah,
day, just not today. And I wouldn't throw that at him right now. When you're in defense mode, thinking about a future like that is just not possible. Um, so what happens is with time, the more in defense mode you are, the less time you can think about whether it's future or past, and you start living in right now. And there
mhm,
literally isn't, you can't think about the future that doesn't exist. That's a made up time.
yeah,
um, so so focusing on what's happening right now is gonna help him way more than going, oh, and then that's also going into like your fear. Um, and fear distorts reality. So if you're like, oh, um, if you play video games all day, then you're not gonna get a job, and then you're gonna be homeless, and then you don't go there.
yeah.
That's not
And
reality.
nowadays, there are so many jobs that can
Mhm.
surround people's strengths. Like, if
Yeah.
his strength is playing video games, there are
Oh
jobs
yeah.
that are totally about that now. And that's super
Yeah.
amazing because you can still find a job that fits you
There's
no
people
matter
who
what.
try out new video games and test them. There's
Mhm.
live streams. There's people who do so many different things. Let's plays. Um, there's gaming conventions. There's creating video games. There's competitions. How good you are at the video games. There's so many different different things.
Yeah.
So and things being created. Um,
Yeah. There's
so
endless possibilities. I
yeah.
don't think that nowadays it's so good because we aren't as limited in kind of what our disabilities allow us to do because there are so many options now. I was always concerned that I wouldn't have the energy to work a very long day or run around a lot during a job. And so I really struggled to find a career path that I felt could fit my capabilities and what I was able to do. Because the truth is, I don't know in the future if I'm going to get better or worse or what's going to happen. So I need to kind of create a path that I feel like I can successfully be on and also enjoy while still accommodating what my body's able to do physically. Um, so yeah, there's plenty of paths for everybody, um, and endless possibilities.
So I wish I could get to everyone's comment, but I've got to start wrapping up. If there's Iris, if there's any last story or message that you'd like to talk about with the invisible disability or ableism.
Um, I don't think so. I think we covered a lot of it, and um, I think it's up to really just raising awareness for everybody, teaching children about it, teaching authorities about it, teaching everybody that they're, not, you can't see everything. Not everything's visible. And I think really the answer and the solution is just going to be awareness for everybody. And the more that we can do that, the better I think it's going to be.
So do you want to plug anything? Social media?
Um, I mean, I have an Instagram, but yeah, I don't really have much on social media. If you want to follow me on Instagram, it's at Iris_Van Dalen. But um, yeah, that's kind of it. Woo, and there goes Stella.
And
um,
Stella has an Instagram too.
yeah, Stella has an Instagram. Her Instagram is at service_Stella. Um, so yeah, hers is actually more interesting than mine. So I would follow her. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for joining me, Iris.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. It's a great conversation. And I obviously love what you're doing here. I think it's awesome.
Thank you. All right. Everyone come back next week. I do these live streams every Wednesday at 7 Pacific Standard Time. So next week, my guest is going to be Light. We're going to talk about why people change their names and about identity and mental health. And he actually works in the video game field. So speaking about that, which is his dream job, and he's super excited about that. So I'm excited to have him on. So come back next week for that, and come back with all your questions. I love that you guys were asking questions. It's so great when you guys start interacting. Who knows what direction it'll go in when that happens. Thank you guys for watching. Check out autism.com. We have our support group tomorrow for those on the spectrum with Asperger profiles or anything similar. I'll be there. We have some guest speaker coming to that, I believe, talking about jobs. Yeah, check out the blog on autism.com. You just click on the blog. I've written about fear. So that's my latest blog. Check that out if you haven't read through there. I think I mentioned the transitions blogs on there. I have some new stuff I'm writing. They'll hopefully be out soon. And we have our launch party you can RSVP for on Tuesday. And then I have my workshop in Florida that you can get tickets for as well. That's all on the website. I believe it's on the calendar. And there's links all on the Facebooks for that. And then I think on Instagram. And I'll be uploading this to YouTube. So if you go to Starlight Talks on YouTube, I'm trying to figure out how to change the URL for that so you can quickly get there, but it's not letting me for whatever reason. So I'll have that linked as soon as this is uploaded. So yeah, thank you guys for watching. Come back next week.
Bye.
Stay colorful.